Hey everybody, this is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics. I am here today with Katie Fahey, who is the founder and president of a group called Voters, Not Politicians in Michigan. Hello, Katie.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I'm so excited you could come on. So, let's start with the obvious question. What is Voters, Not Politicians?
So Voters Not Politicians is a ballot question committee in Michigan looking to enact redistricting reform for the 2018 election. So we're a statewide campaign that is looking to end gerrymandering by creating an independent citizens commission that will draw the district lines.
And so you said it's a ballot question group. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so a lot of times our laws are made by the legislature, bringing them through. But in Michigan and a handful of other states, citizens actually have the option to craft their own language. In our case, we're going for a constitutional amendment. So we've crafted constitutional amendment language, and we're going to bring it up to the people of Michigan to vote on. So it's kind of a form of direct democracy where citizens can actually write the language, gather signatures, and then get it onto the ballot for everybody to vote on. And you don't necessarily need the legislature to be involved.
All right, so we'll dive into more details about how all of that is working, but let's take a step back for a minute and tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your background and how did you get involved in this kind of work?
Yeah, so I have never really done anything political before. I have a background in sustainable business, which is like environmental, social-oriented business. I've worked in corporate America, and then also have worked in the recycling and waste industry. That's my current day job. But actually, this whole campaign got started from a Facebook post. So, yeah, just literally threw out into the world like, hey, looking to end gerrymandering in Michigan. If you're interested, let me know, smiley face. And it's now evolved into over 5,000 volunteers, pretty much in like every county and city in Michigan. And it's been very exciting. And I think just something different. We still don't even have a physical office. We do everything online, which is kind of different too, but we've kind of learned as we have gone. And I think both of my backgrounds actually helped a lot in that, in kind of community organizing and being able to bring people together.
This podcast also started with a Facebook post, so you're in good company.
Yes. I love it.
So, do you think that being involved in something like this has helped make you more optimistic about politics now?
Actually, yeah. I think even more optimistic than when I first made the post. I think when I first threw it out on Facebook, I didn't really know what would happen, or I thought, a group of us would go and find another group that was doing something. But honestly, I have seen just thousands of people come together and just dedicate, all of their free time to wanting to figure out a solution. We are very strictly nonpartisan. So we have also from the beginning had people who really don't agree on a lot that wanted to come together and work to actually create a solution instead of just arguing more or adding to the back and forth discourse. And it's been really inspiring. We have law professors and brain surgeons and waiters and waitresses and stay-at-home parents and veterinarians all coming together to write language, gather signatures, and then get it on the ballot. And for me, just seeing how many people are willing to take a chance and who are ready to go out and get involved and talk to their neighbors and their friends about something as dry as gerrymandering. I mean, a lot of us who like politics, I think we get excited about it or the talking about it. But I mean, really, we have talked to now hundreds of thousands of people all about redistricting reform, this process that happens once every 10 years. And just seeing the enthusiasm has been great. Michigan is we have a lot of rural areas, we have a lot of urban areas. And so we have a Facebook group where all of our volunteers are located. And, you'd see people posting pictures of themselves gathering signatures in cow pastures. And then you'd also see people in like the downtown Detroit Jazz Festival also gathering signatures and like out on kayaks. And just, it was great. It's been really inspiring.
That's really cool. So, just in case any of our listeners don't know yet, let's talk a little bit about what gerrymandering is. I think it's becoming more and more common that people are hearing about it, so probably most people know what that means, but they probably haven't all thought about the nitty-gritty of it. So, what is gerrymandering?
Yeah, so we all have representatives. You have your state level representatives and then your federal level representatives. And most of those representatives have district lines. This means that, they have a group of voters that they are representing at your state capital and then hopefully in Washington as well. But right now, those lines are drawn once every 10 years after the census, so they can see population change. But politicians are in charge of drawing their own lines. So before they'll run for an election, they get to draw the lines and choose which voters they want in their districts. Gerrymandering is when they use that line drawing power to make it so that they're either more easily elected or so that their party is more easily elected, even if the people wouldn't want that to be happening. It's usually called, political partisan gerrymandering. You have one political party that happens to have more representatives at the time, really getting a super majority when the people may not be voting that way. Or there's also been cases of racial gerrymandering too, where minority populations have a diminished vote because of how these lines are drawn.
And how has this worked in Michigan? How did you become aware that there was a problem with gerrymandering?
So I remember learning about gerrymandering in elementary school, and then again in high school, and again in college. It always struck me as odd because whenever the government teacher would say, like, oh yeah, we have politicians who are doing this really corrupt stuff, but nobody ever does anything about it. I remember just thinking, like, okay, so we know that it's been going on for years and years, but we're just okay that, like, it doesn't make sense and that we basically don't have people actually being represented how they're voting. And then I think recently with the advancements in technology, this line drawing is getting even more intense. So they can go down to like the individual street level and say, like, okay, these, 3 houses vote this way and these 3 houses vote that way, and they'll tear up your neighborhood just to get a couple more votes. And in Michigan, it's very ridiculous if you start looking at the lines. I live in the greater Grand Rapids area, and one of our House districts, it's the 76th, it literally has one street that's less than a mile long that has 3 different districts going across it. So if you think about how many people are going to be door knocking, how many TV ads you're going to see, all for a state House representative. And the reality of that is, people have no idea who's representing them, or their neighbors are being represented by somebody else. So if they have a problem in their community, they don't really have a large voice when they're talking to their representative, because that representative probably has to represent sections of, potentially hundreds of different neighborhoods and communities instead of large sections of 1 or 2. In the Detroit area, especially in Michigan, anywhere that there's high populations, there is one district that you can't even drive in an hour from top to bottom. And if you think about candidates who are new getting into the political field and they don't have as much money as maybe some of the more established players, I mean, even just trying to understand where you're supposed to go to canvass or campaign can be really confusing. And it happens. It's happened from both parties, and it's happened for a really long time. Michigan tends to vote about 50% for Democrats, 50% for Republicans, and depending who happened to be in charge that last time, our representation never looks that way.
I live in Illinois, where gerrymandering has favored the Democrats.
Yeah.
I will say our districts look bizarre, too, in some cases. I've had the experience of calling my congressional representative's office, so for the U.S. Congress, and I called her office, and first thing they do is ask you your address, and I gave my address, and they said, well, you're not in this district. And I said, well, yes, I am. Look more closely, but I'm at the very tip of the district, and so most of the house numbers in this district do not go so low. And they didn't believe me. They looked at a map and then they believed me. But, it's pretty bad when even the own office of the representative doesn't know that you belong there.
Yeah, that is very bad. I mean, Illinois, you guys don't have term limits, do you?
No, I don't think we have term limits for anything.
Because I think that even amplifies the problem, because then you have politicians who, if they're career politicians and they've been in there for 20, 30 years, and each time they're drawing the lines, they're guaranteeing themselves that safe seat time and time again. You'll even see politicians who know who their primary opponent is going to be, and the maps get issued maybe 3 months before the next election, and they'll just draw their primary opponent's house out of the district. And they find out, a couple months before the election, where then they have a whole new set of constituents, which just adds into the problem.
This idea that the split of voters might be around 50-50, give or take a few percentage points from year to year, and the representatives are not so evenly split. I think that that's one of the really compelling things, for for things like court cases that have come up that, you can look at numbers and say, this doesn't make sense. I think the same thing happened when we look at Alabama and the recent special Senate election. So the Democrat in that case won, but of the 7 congressional districts in Alabama, 6 of them would have gone to Republican the way the vote happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that has definitely happened in Michigan too. We've even had some cases where, one political party actually got the majority of the popular vote, yet the other party got a majority of the seats in the Senate. And that's like the complete opposite of how the people voted. And then you wonder, since these lines are drawn once every 10 years, I mean, it's those people's voices not being listened to election after election. And you wonder why we have voter apathy or why people feel like their vote doesn't matter. And I mean, this is one of those reasons why, because in some ways it doesn't really matter. They've the math that has gone into trying to make sure that these people don't have their voices being heard.
All right. So we know what the problem is. You've convinced me. I was already convinced, so perhaps I'm an easy target. But what is the solution? What do we do about gerrymandering?
Yeah. So when you're thinking about taking on gerrymandering, so even when I made the Facebook post, there were a couple different options for how we could take this on. So one way, especially if you don't have the voter referendum process, is to file a lawsuit. We see a lot of that in the Supreme Court right now. The one issue with lawsuits is that even if maps have been found to be drawn illegally or too gerrymandered, they get kicked back to the same politicians to go and try drawing again, but a little less obviously gerrymandered. In states where you do have ballot initiative process, really, there's a couple key things you can add to changing or to really having an impact on the line. So one is just changing who is drawing them. So literally, taking them away from the people who have the worst conflict of interest and giving it to somebody else. In our case, we're proposing a citizens commission. This has happened in other states. And what you see is higher voter turnout. You see people who are happier with their representatives. And you also see new blood getting into the political system because those incumbents can't draw their own lines. Another thing is transparency. So often in states where the legislature is drawing their own lines, there's no public input or very quick public input. In some cases, you only get a list of census tracts. So unless you have mapping software and know how to plug those in, you don't have any idea what they look like. And also they can often hire lobbyists and they don't have to follow, public meeting acts or anything like that. It all happens behind closed doors. So even just taking that process and bringing it out into the open, making it so that people can participate. For our solution, there's going to be at least 10 mandatory meetings across the state where people can come and give input on how they think their community should be drawn up. But also, commissioners can't have any meetings that aren't recorded and up for the public. And then I think another thing is just how the maps are being drawn. So the criteria, how should we be drawing these things? And there's a lot of different thoughts around that, but really, I think it goes back to the core concept of our democracy and having representation. So how do you want to define that? Do you want it to be just based on population? Do you want it to include community input? Do you want it to have symmetry and match up with how people are voting? So if 50% of the state votes for one political party, do you want 50% of the seats to reflect that? Mm-hmm. And that's really what we've done too, is kind of tried to do that. In our case, because we started on Facebook and we didn't already have legislation picked out, we actually did 33 town halls in 33 days where we went and asked the people of Michigan, what do you think is fair? Do you think lobbyists should be able to draw these lines? Do you think politicians should? Do you think regular people should? Should they be from across the state? What does this look like? And also, what do you want the rules to look like? And I think we found a really good solution that's true to the people not only now, but who will be voting in 20 and 30 years with different sets of district lines.
So you said that you are proposing that there be an independent commission to draw the maps. So what would that look like? What does it mean to be an independent commission?
Yeah, independent kind of means two different things. One is that it's removed from the legislature so that they can't interfere and try and play party politics in the system. We're doing a citizens commission too. So these will be 13 individuals who are going to come together. They'll have different political beliefs and have to be diverse